I'd almost forgotten the Buick is still actually in business. So now we have a 2025 Buick Enclave, completely redesigned and refreshed for the 2025 model year. And the front end is the only area where I don't think this design, I'm not sure. I think it's a better looking design from a front view, but the rest of the car looks great. The interior has a humongous screen in it. So what we're gonna do in this video is compare, of course, the design, the old one to the new one, the 2025, in Photoshop from a front, side, and rear, and also the interior, which I think is the biggest update here. But before we do that, let's have a look at what's going on with the spec and tech from this article from Car and Driver, linked down below. So, the 2025 Buick Enclave receives a redesign that makes it bigger than before and adopts the brand's new face. You have a curved 30-inch display in the interior. When is this display raise size for biggest display going to stop? I don't know, but it is a combined screen, so it's kind of like a normal 2.3-inch screens in the interior with one single screen. It's also the first Buick to offer GM's Super Cruise hands-free driving system. Every Enclave replaces the old 310 horsepower 3.6-liter V6. Now we get a 4-cylinder, but it does have more power, 328 horsepower from a 2.5-liter turbo 4, and you have either all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive. With the redesigned 2025 Buick Enclave, the brand has now completed the entire transformation with this new design language across the entire lineup with this new car. The Enclave's trim levels are revised to include the Preferred, you have the Sport Touring or the ST, and the Avenir. They're all larger, wider, and taller than the predecessor. Each trim has a unique grille and wheel options, going all the way up to 22 inches for the Avenir trim, which is something that I would probably want to have, since this is a rather big SUV. And you have the Buick's new Tri-Shield logo appears on the leading edge of the hood instead of inside of the grille, which is the more traditional vibe for the position of the logo. And guess what? Another trend of the decade comes in here for 2025. We do have full width taillights, so a full light bar in the rear end. So this new engine is a turbocharged 2.5-liter, and as I said, more power, 328 horsepower, and also the torque is 326 pound-feet of torque. You don't have the 9-speed automatic anymore. Instead, they went down. They just ditched one gear. And now we have an 8-speed unit. And again, front or all-wheel drive is available. And I would definitely go for all-wheel drive in this type of package. Now, this is a trend that seems to come back from the old 70s and 80s, specifically when it comes to American cars. No shifter on the center console. Instead, it's a shifter that sits in the steering column. And that is something that we've seen a lot with EVs, but it's starting to come back in normal internal combustion engine cars as well. And that happened for the this Buick as well. And then you have the new 30-inch screen on the dash. You can see that right here. I'm gonna let you know what I think about this screen in just a minute in Photoshop. You have the combination of the infotainment screen and the gauge cluster, all customizable. And in the middle, in between these, right here are some customizable icons, so you can do whatever you want with this center portion of the screen. Wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are standard. You have a wireless charging pad in this floating armrest right there, and some cool speakers as well. 7 exterior camera views are the standard. It goes up to 9 cameras if you add the towing package and the Super Cruise onto this car. There are just cameras everywhere in cars these days, and expect each trim to see a price hike of about $3,000 from the current Enclave. I do think, looking at the tech and also the design, it feels like it's worth $3,000 more than the previous Enclave. So it's going to start at around $49,000 up to $62,000. So with that said, let's jump into the fun stuff here and let's talk about this design. So the old one, this is from 2022, with the one you see up top. I really like the front fascia. It has a very classic design to it. It looks clean, this design right here. We have a pretty traditional layout for where everything is supposed to go. You can see that we do have also a starting point up here, a little bit stylized with these angles right over the daytime running lights. So these are obviously not the headlights up here. It looks like It looks like it should be a headlight, but it's been sitting out, under the sun for too long, and it's kind of faded and has some disease to its eyeball. But this is the daytime run light, so this is not the headlight. The headlight, even in 2022, we did have the bumper headlight for the 2022 model year. We also have this chrome piece sticking into the grille, which I think looks pretty cool, and the big chrome logo in the middle of the grille, which they now moved up, and they also switched out the logo completely. You can see the new logo down here, and he got a lot more boxier, this design. This feels, to me, if I were to look at this and just squint my eyes a little bit, this would be a Ford to me. It looks like a Ford, but Ford does have the headlights up here instead of the daytime run lights like we have down here in the Buick Enclave. You have the headlights again in the bumper, which is a massive trend, as you know, right now. But he got a lot more static, a lot more boxy. Overall, I do like the design changes, the exterior design changes for the Enclave. I do think it looks a little bit more grown up, and specifically in side view, the old Enclave, not sure what happened there in the side. We're just going to have a look at in the next slide here. And then you have the big grille in the front end, completely blacked out, and again, a lot more static in this design. But I do think something is missing here. It just feels too simplistic to just have this mesh going across the entire width of the front end, and it also sits pretty high here in the front as well. You do have some cooling intakes down here at the bottom with some black trim for this specific trim level, which seems to be the ST, as you can see right there in the grille. Now, looking at the side view here, so the old Enclave, I'm not sure. I was never really sure. Is this an SUV or is this a minivan? Because it definitely has a lot of minivan vibes to it, the proportions. You see how the hood is pretty short, and then the A-pillar starts almost over the axle, and then stretches back, and you also have this rear bumper stretching very far down, removing this SUV look. If we were to have the bumper removed at this point, so remove this area, it would be more of an SUV look, but they just dragged the rear end down here. Not a huge fan of these wheels on this specific trim on the old Enclave, but they did have some nice, it feels like the designers had some nice hand flow when they were designing this car, because you can see we have some lines here at the bottom, some let's just add a splash of chrome since it is a Buick. Also chrome going around the greenhouse here, a little bit more chrome right here. So the styling, the line flow is nice in this car, but the overall proportions is definitely minivan style, and that is a huge improvement for the new Enclave down here. You can see just how much more confident it got in the lines and the proportions. Look at the hood here, for example, a lot longer hood. We also have now a almost upright front end for the hood, giving it a more stately design. And this greenhouse also more chiseled overall. We have a nice line here for the shoulder line. We also have sort of a line here cutting from the corner of the headlight, and this line sits pretty high up in this case. It feels like it has a dual line in the side, one here, and then you have a second one at the very bottom to properly carve out some of this volume that we have in the side. I do like this trim level, the ST. I would maybe not even switch out these wheels, because I do think these wheels look good. I don't think these are the 22s that you get on the Avenir top spec, but everything being blacked out, definitely the way to go, at least in my opinion, for this new Buick Enclave. And you can see that the rear end also has a more static and stately look to it, giving it definitely more of an SUV vibe now, instead of having it be the old 90s style minivan that we have up here. Now, looking at the rear end before we jump in and have a look at the massive changes for the interior, the rear end of the old one, it definitely, to me, it looks like a 90s design, this Buick up here, with a lot of elliptical shapes and a lot of curvatures. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just the styling felt very outdated in this design. And then they decided to add a bit of a cut in the trunk right there. Why not? We don't have visible exhaust pipe. Instead, we do have some styling features down here at the bottom. As you can see, we don't have a light bar in the old one, but what we did have, what makes this a modern car, is pretty much the only thing that makes it a modern car are these LEDs that we have in the taillights. Now, looking at the new one here, Same thing here, very chiseled design and a huge step forward when it comes to modern looks. It looks a little bit like a Chevy to me in the rear, and this could be like a bigger Chevy SUV because they have very similar design languages. You can see the new logo here. I like this feature here with this little chamfer up top. You can see the reflections here, how beautiful this is. I like that area. I also like the taillights because we have very dynamic, look at this big juicy LED that we have right here. Even though they decided to go with a full LED light bar, it has a lot of dynamic movement in it because you can see the light bar in the center right here is thin, and then it grows wider and into this massive solid LED that we have in the corner piece, looking super cool. But other than that, is very horizontal. And again, this comes back to the more boxy design that we have for the Enclave these days, which I prefer over the a lot more soft, rounded, bubbly design that we had in the previous generation. So well done overall, except for maybe work a little bit more on the front end to make it a little bit more interesting, the grille pattern. But looking at the interior here, so again, the old one feels like an old school design. It feels like I'm sitting in a roller coaster just looking at all the curvatures that goes on in here. It's curvature here, curvature up here, curvature over the gauge cluster, which is a great housing for the gauge cluster, and then a lot more radiuses and curvatures across the entire interior. And this is what I'm talking about when it feels like a late 90s, maybe mid 2000s design. It's still not a bad design at all. I love that they kept the tactile features for the climate, like a separate unit down here. And the thing is, I do think they kept this feature in the new Enclave, because look at this, we still have a small little control panel down here. You can see that we have all these toggles down here. You can see a fan in this area. Maybe this is heated steering wheel or something like that. So it feels like maybe the controls for the climate control settings are still analog and physical in the new one, but we also have that down here. So I'm a little bit confused whether it is analog or digital in the new one, but thankfully they didn't get rid of all buttons in here. I do overall, so 30-inch screen, not an easy task to integrate that in an interior like this, but have a look at this. How beautifully done they made it with this design, the outline for the framing for this screen. This is as good as it can get when you mount a 30-inch TV up on the dash. It still feels like it's a part of the overall interior with the styling that we have going on here. And I also like this floating armrest that we have in the middle with the wireless charging here. This is not the selection for the drive modes anymore. Instead, you have the drive and reverse neutral with this stock. You also have the paddles here for the 8-speed automatic. Steering wheel looks very nice. You have the Super Cruise. In this case, you can see that because we do have the light element up here on the steering wheel, and the new logo looks very clean as well, which was not bad at all, but this just feels more stately having them sit you know, in line, horizontal like this. So overall, it's a pretty cool design upgrade from Buick for the new Enclave, especially when you look, I think the side view for me is my favorite view of this. It remains to be seen how many cars, how many new Enclaves Buick are actually going to sell, because the competition is very harsh in this specific segment, and Buick always felt like an underdog to me, but maybe that will come back now when you have the new 2025 Enclave.